So let me give one more great analogy for people. We have all dropped spaghetti sauce on the counter. You wipe it up with a wet sponge, no big deal. You leave it overnight, you're scraping it off with a spatula. You leave it 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years, and it's old and moldy and nasty. And that, my friends, is conflict. And that's why I called the book Holding the Calm, The Secret to Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension. Because 100% of conflict, 100% starts with tension. And the tension can be, or it can be, which is actually harder to be able to deal with. So when you attune yourself to the wet spaghetti sauce, life is a lot easier and it doesn't mutate into this terrible, horrible thing.
Welcome to the People-Powered Solutions podcast. In this show, you'll gain expert advice and tips on building a thriving workplace culture with happy employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of People-Powered Solutions. One of the things we've talked about time and time again is that conflict is absolutely unavoidable. As many times as I've heard, we'll teach you how to avoid conflict. What I really wish people would embrace and understand is that conflict is not to be avoided. Conflict should, in fact, be encouraged, and you need to ensure that you are equipping your teams to navigate those more courageous conversations, as well as to manage conflict when it does. And I'm not going to say if and when, because it will be arising. Come on, we're often conflicted with ourselves, our head's saying one thing, our heart's saying something else. So all that to say, if one person can be conflicted within themselves, the minute you start to multiply perspectives and you start to multiply people in teams, then it should be a no-brainer that conflict will 100% happen. Today, we welcome author Hesha Abrams, and she's going to talk to us about her book that provides a lot more insight into why does tension arise, and then actual tips and tricks and strategies on how you can better navigate that tension and how you can better navigate that conflict. So welcome, Hesha.
My pleasure, Lori.
So before we get started and deep dive into kind of the contents of your book, and you can provide us some of the tips and tricks that you do convey through that book, I'd like for you to share with our audience how Hesha got to do what Hesha does today.
Well, I'm a lawyer, and 30 years ago, in 1 week, I won a case that I really should have lost. It wasn't right. I just kind of outlawyered the other side, and I lost a case that I should have won. It was a little pro bono eviction thing I did, and I got good old boyed down at the courthouse, and it caused a crisis of faith in me. I said, this cannot be the way it is. It's not okay. And when I found mediation, you mean you talk to people for a living? You solve problems? This sounds wonderful. And what's interesting is I like to use an analogy because your introduction talked about how we all avoid conflict. And of course we do. It's like a root canal without anesthesia, or a colonoscopy, depending on which end you're going for, without anesthesia. It's terrible. Nobody in their right mind says, I want it, even though intellectually you are 100% right. So why is that? It's kind of like saying, I want you to eat soup, but I'm not going to give you a spoon. Once I give you a spoon, it's better. If I give you a fork, the soup has a real hard time. So let me give one more great analogy for people. We have all dropped spaghetti sauce on the counter. You wipe it up with a wet sponge, no big deal. You leave it overnight, you're scraping it off with a spatula. You leave it 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years, and it's old and moldy and nasty. And that, my friends, is conflict. And that's why I called the book Holding the Calm, The Secret to Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension. Because 100% of conflict, 100% starts with tension. And the tension can be, or it can be, which is actually harder to be able to deal with. So when you attune yourself to the wet spaghetti sauce, life is a lot easier and it doesn't mutate into this terrible, horrible thing. Now, we have techniques for handling it when it's a terrible, horrible thing too, of course. But prevention is always worth a pound to cure. And that's why I have tips and tricks that I've been doing for over 3 decades that actually work with real people. And what I want to say is I'm not a big fan of win-win problem solving. I know that's the thing, getting to yes, la 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 la. It's lovely for about 10 or 15% of the people, where you have an alignment of interest, the power is somewhat equalized, you're emotionally mature, and we can get to yes. That is just great. What about the other 80 to 85% where I hate your guts, or you scare me, or you're a narcissist, or you're selfish, or you're power grabbing, or you hate me, or you're trying to hurt me, or let's talk about those, because that's what my book is really about. How to handle the real stuff of the bumper car ego of life.
I absolutely love it. And when you talked about your kind of aha moment when it comes to mediation, I had a similar moment. That's exactly what this idea and this notion. I've always been someone who likes to support others in developing, right? So the idea of, from my perspective, and that's just my interpretation, of course, the legal system was more about, and just the judiciary. Wow, that's a huge word for a French girl. So it was more about targeting your opponent's kind of weakness, figuring out what's that weakest link and capitalizing on it. For me, that just did not sit well as just a model. Then I discovered mediation, where it's also about having them talk, having them be in that conduit between them to help diffuse what they're actually wanting to say, and helping to diffuse what the statement they've given and bring it down and have it boil down to what they're really saying. And then them witnessing that and suddenly developing that skill themselves that they can carry out into everywhere else in their life. I was like, I much prefer that model. I much prefer the idea of equipping others, to your point of ensuring that you're giving them the spoon. And mediation is about giving the spoon, in my opinion.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed. In the cases I do now, I mean, I've done everything. I've done, every from small claims, whose roommate's cat peed on the rug, all the way up to, Google and Facebook and NVIDIA and Verizon and IBM. I mean, those are my clients. That's who I do big stuff. And I'll walk into a room and someone will say, give me $100 million. And the other side will say, here's 100,000 pound sand. The techniques work there. And they also work with fighting with your spouse or your kid's teacher or your coworker or your boss or the church or your HOA, because it's all human beings with, I'm right, you're wrong. I might be polite enough to be quiet and listen to you while you're talking, but I'm really arguing in my own head because I'm going to make my point.
Mm-hmm.
This is just real. So I don't argue that chocolate cake shouldn't be fattening. Chocolate cake is fattening. Okay, you can use as much broccoli as you want and not as much chocolate cake. I accept the reality of human beings. Now, working within that, how can I better my position? How can I improve my game? How can I move through life more swiftly and smoothly and with less barriers? That's what holding the calm is all about.
Okay, well, let's get right into it then. How can I? How can I move? We get started right there with, how can I move more swiftly?
So what I did in this book is I wanted to make it very simple and easy and accessible for people. So that's why I did a little $15 paperback, because what most people think is you need to take some course or a class or get a PhD from some program. You don't. You really don't. You need just to have some simple tricks and simple tools on how to do something. So I love analogies. And the reason I do is because 80% of us are visual learners. And if you look at the Bible, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormon, all of it, it all teaches an iconography. Apple computers, Windows, all run on iconography. Why? Because we use words. And right now, you and I are talking and using words, but there are icons that are going into people's minds. So that's why I speak like that. So let me give you.
I love that, by the way, just interjecting. I'm a huge analogy fan as well. Specifically in my book, I cover a lot of plant analogies, to the point where where towards the end, I'm like, okay, this, I promise, is the last plant analogy. So I'm all about analogies, and I agree that it's about creating that visual because people connect to that visual.
and then they have it afterwards. And here's the proof of it. How many people went to, church, or they listened to a speech, and the person talked for 45 minutes and they said, man, that was really good. Well, what did he or she say? Um, um, you don't retain it. But when you have images, stories, analogies, that's how we retain information. So going back to your initial question, I like to use the thing of a bomb connector, a bomb detector. There's a bomb in the town square. The guy waddles out in his Michelin suit. He doesn't just start cutting wires. He diagnoses. Is it a pressure switch? Is it a chemical switch? Is there a remote control? What do I do first? So everybody who's listening knows, yes, we should listen to each other, blah, 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 but we don't do it. So instead of saying listen, say diagnose. It's more active, it's more powerful. And now I'm listening to you, but I have to also diagnose. And there's a whole lot of things I talk about in the book about things that you can check off, because people are not that complicated. If you're listening to them and you're diagnosing them, I'm going to know if you're a thinker or a feeler. I think that's the right idea. I feel that's the right idea. So if I just make that one simple diagnostic trick, now when I talk to you, I talk in thinking words, or I talk to you in feeling words. It just makes the resonance of the message connect better. Just that is so simple.
But
For
does it
our
not
listeners,
does it not also quiet that mind chatter when we are listening to respond rather than listening to hear?
well said.
Right?
Absolutely well said.
Listening for that diagnosis, you're listening to see what's actually happening. So if you don't mind, what are, like, say, 2 or 3 things that are on that checklist to be as you're trying to diagnose?
So the first one would be thinkers versus feelers. If you've got feelers, you don't talk about data and points and facts. And to a data person, you don't talk about feelings or fairness or justice or rightness, because it doesn't matter. So just that simple tailoring of your message is super easy to do, because you'll hear it in the person's words. I think this, I feel that. That seems to me is a feeling person. That analysis doesn't work for me is a thinking person, right? So it's not really hard to do, and you can do that within 3 or 4 minutes of someone talking. So let's do one more. Auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learners. Most of our listeners know about that, but they don't necessarily, but they think of it in a training context. Think of it in a communication context. If I want to be effective with you, Lori, and you're a fast talker, I'm a slow talker, I'm going to try to speed up a little. If you're a slow talker and I'm a fast talker, I should slow down a little bit. Now that just sounds polite, really. But as a diagnostic tool, what I'm doing is I'm moving in line with you, because neuroscience has shown that human beings, we favor reciprocity and similarity. If you're like me, that's really where all this DEI stuff and all this prejudice and culture, that's where all that stuff really comes from. We as babies are wired to like faces that look like ours, to find commonality, to find similarity. So that's one of the other things you do. You immediately find commonality and similarity. I don't care if it's we're both vegetarians, we both like barbecue, we listen to country music, you're wearing red, I'm wearing red. I mean, it can be as simple as that, because the brain, again, is wired to find that. And when you start finding that, all of a sudden, the amygdala, which is the fear and negativity center in the brain, doesn't say friend or foe. All of a sudden, okay, maybe you're friend. Maybe this is okay. So that's, I mean, and I could dish out 30 more for you.
Those are 2 really helpful ones, but they're quick ones, but helpful ones. That, if again, it'll help you shift into that mode of listening to hear, because you need to be hearing certain words and listening to a certain pace. And I really love that you talked about fast pace, because again, French being my first language, I tend to be a really, really fast talker. And you're right that I have had to pause. And when I get that deer in the headlights look from the other person, like, oh my God, I need her to slow down. I've had to pause and slow my pace down. But as a listener, one of the most frustrating things for me is someone who's a slow talker. Because I'm like, okay, come on, let's get this done. You're gonna land
Yep.
somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%.
It's
If you're
just
able to tune
it's
in.
just resin. I mean, you can think of it as polite because it is, of course, civil and polite, but it's just more effective when you glide up to somebody and you fly in tandem.
Mm.
It's really as simple as that. And let me add one more because all of that is positive stuff. Let me add a negative one. We are all human beings who have fragile, delicate egos. Every one of us. We get hurt, we get betrayed, we don't. Who likes being criticized, for God's sakes? I mean, nobody. And when people say, give me feedback, they don't want you to criticize them. What they're really saying is validate me, validate me. And validation is the WD-40 of the world. It is the grease on the tracks of the world. But you can't validate externalities. You've got to validate who someone is and what happens. So, I'd like to give two different techniques. And I said I would do the negative one first. So, let's say we're talking and I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm hungry, I'm cranky, I'm whatever. And I just bark at you because I'm human and you're human and you don't like it. And your face clearly shows that. Well, I cannot be wrong. I can tell you you're too sensitive, or what's wrong with you, or I'm sorry, I got angry, but that's it. Or I can say, I'm sorry, I didn't handle that as well as I would have liked to. May I have a do over?
Love it.
Who says no to that question?
When
Nobody.
framed that way. When framed that way.
Exactly. Nobody does. Now you get a do over. And interestingly enough, the compatibility and receptivity goes up,
Mm-hmm.
goes up. It's absolutely a magnificent, amazing thing. And when I tell people, you know who it works great with? Significant others and kids and family members, because they don't expect it out of you, you know? And when you say to a teenager, I didn't handle that as well as I would have liked to, I wasn't really listening well enough. May I have a do over? And would you tell me again? You have developed a phenomenal relationship with that individual. I mean, it's really remarkable.
Can I'm gonna have to interject and bring in, of course, because it's my jam, the the workplace culture perspective on just that.
Mm-hmm.
What that one sentence tells me is accountability. I'm owning this. I am owning that I didn't necessarily do that right. And
Mm-hmm.
then asking for permission for a do-over also shows commitment to I want to do better.
Mm-hmm.
I value this relationship. So it also tells the other person, I value our relationship and I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. So
Yep.
on a team perspective, think about how trust building that one sentence can be.
Huge, huge.
Right?
Because what most people do when they apologize is they make it about themselves.
Mm.
It's not about you, it's about me. If I'm sitting here holding a cup, right? And this was my grandmother's ancient Chinese vase, and you're not paying attention and you whack it out of my hands and it shatters. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I yell at you. It wasn't my fault. I mean, it was unintentional. Why are you so mad? It's all about intent. Intent is only relevant in a criminal trial. It's not relevant any other time because we make the assumption that someone didn't wake up in the morning and twirl their mustache and go, ha ha ha, I'm going to be evil today, right? It's about the impact. I hurt you. I embarrassed you. I caused something that happened to you. Whether I meant it or not is really, quite frankly, irrelevant.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge mind shift because if you are a leader that does that, your people will trust you. I mean, we call it accountability and all that stuff is true, but it's that level of vulnerability that makes you trustworthy, that you own your stuff. And then what it does is it sets an example that everyone else.
Exactly.
Imagine you're a team where everyone owns their stuff. My God, what a lovely place that would be to work.
Absolutely. And you're modeling as a leader, you're modeling the behavior you seek from your team members, which should always be paramount, right?
Yeah.
I totally interrupted, but I just wanted to add that because I really love that one sentence. You know, I'm sorry, I did not do that the way I would have liked to. May I
Mhm.
have a do-over?
Isn't
Folks,
that
remember
great?
that one sentence. What was your second strategy?
I don't remember. That was 5 minutes ago. Let's
Sorry.
think. What's I going to do?
Talking about just being able to validation from a validation
Oh,
perspective.
Oh, yes,
Or
yes.
seeking
Thank you.
validation.
So I want to give everybody a little trick. Let's say you're at a meeting. Let's use workplace, and you're at a meeting, and somebody's dominating the conversation, or attacking you or criticizing you. Whatever it is, you have just had it up to here. Like, it's enough. You want to know how you can take control of the situation and dominate the room in 3 seconds?
How?
Lori, you know what I really admire about you? Guess what? Everybody stops talking. Everybody, including the big mouth who wouldn't stop talking, because moi, what are you going to say about moi, about me?
Yes.
That's what they want to hear. So verbs and adjectives are your friend. And let me tell people how to do it, because it's really not hard. Choose your verb. Do you know what I like about you? Do you know what I love about you? Do you know what I admire about you? Do you know what I respect about you? See how easy that is? You pick the verb. I mean, with your significant other to your kid, it's like or love. At work, it's respect or admire.
Okay.
Now, the next part.
That next part is what we need to get to make sure it's not passive aggressive.
Well, and it's super easy. It's something positive and validating. Your enthusiasm, your curiosity, your passion, your commitment, your determination. See, all of what I do in the book is I actually write all these down for people. And I say, hey, take a Post-it note and scribble some of these down so you have it by your phone on your desk, or stick it in your phone, so that in the moment, I mean, I do this all day long, but you have it there and you can see. You don't say, I really like about you, how you can be a real jerk sometime. Or,
right? That's what I was saying. It's like,
yeah, no, but you're very careful that, use the words that I've given, because those words honestly have been tried and true and tested. I use them all the time, and I know they work with 98% of the people. If someone is just being a blowhard, and you say, you know what I really admire about you, your passion, your commitment, your determination, and let's say
to kind of stand your ground on your point.
Exactly. Now, let's say I want the person to be more curious and listen to my point of view. I can say, damn it, listen to my point of view, which, listeners, let us know how well that worked out for you, right? Or I can say, you know what I really admire about you? Your curiosity. You're really interested in seeing new things. Now, what's that person going to do? No, I'm not. I don't want to hear what you have to say.
How's that gonna show up in a meeting?
Exactly. And so all of a sudden, when I want to get something done in a meeting and I've got the most difficult person, I make the idea that person's idea, so that the success becomes theirs. But they know I really did that. So now who's my number one ally? Pretty cool stuff.
101. It is pretty cool stuff. And I've actually used that with my teenagers, planting seeds to make them think it's their idea, and suddenly they're completely on board, especially in the event that I know I'm likely going to encounter some pushback. Then I need to be strategic on how I present the idea to them, for sure.
I have a funny story that somebody told me about an old guy that lived on the street, and there were metal garbage cans, and a bunch of teenagers would go down the street and pick up the garbage cans and bang on him. And it used to drive him crazy. So he came out one day, and instead of yelling at them, he said, boys, I love that music when you bang the lids together. He said, I'll give you $1 every time you do it, because it's music when you pass my house. Sure. So for the next 2 days, that's what he did. On the third day, he said, guys, my Social Security check didn't come in. I'm a little tight on money. I can only give you $0.25 today. Well, heck, we're not going to do it for only $0.25.
That's brilliant. It's
right. Brilliant. And let me give one more, because I want people to get this. Here's another good one. Very expensive private school. The girls would put red lipstick on and go up and kiss the mirror in the bathroom. So there were little red lip kisses all the time. And the janitors were always complaining about they had to scrub the lipstick off and how they could get it off. So the principal brought the girls in and said, girls, I don't know who's doing this. And of course, no one admitted it. Let me show you how the janitor cleans it. And she took the squeegee, put it in the toilet, and then cleaned the mirror. They all went, oh, and it never happened again.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
So see, in my book, I have tons of stories like that, because if you can find a way to turn something quick and fast, it's not about I'm right, you're wrong. It's not about you're stupid, I'm smart. Let me educate you. Let me convince you to do the right thing. No, that's not how human beings make decisions. That's not how it happens. Human beings make decisions based on their self-interest, how it applies to me, how it affects me.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? So in the book, I call it WIIFM. Everyone listens to that radio station.
I'm familiar with it, with that acronym. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so good. But if you think about it that way, not in a bad way where, oh my God, you're so selfish and narcissistic, and I can't believe you only think of yourself. We all do that. So if you can find out, like these cases where I go 100 million and 100,000, how do I settle those? Everyone went to fancy schools. Everyone thinks they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not teaching or educating anybody. I'm aligning self-interest. And literally, if you figure out what somebody wants, and this is the other thing to think of, there's a guy named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. We're social psychologists, and they won a Nobel Prize in economics for proving that Adam Smith's rational man doesn't really exist, and that people make decisions based on irrationality. And what was so fascinating to me is that their studies showed that 80% of people don't want to win. They want to not lose. Think what a difference that is. Someone's arguing with you, right? And you think they have to win. I'm telling you, 80% of the time, it's they don't want to lose. Now you've got a much broader diagnostic view, don't you? Are they trying to win, or are they trying to not lose? What am I going to offer? What am I going to present? Which need am I going to satiate? It's a terrific diagnostic tool.
And even in that moment, to shift your perspective from they don't actually need to win, they need to not lose. It opens up a few more options on that.
Doesn't it?
Right?
Doesn't it?
I absolutely love that. Okay, tell us a bit more of what people can expect in your book. What are some of the topics covered? Maybe walk us through a bit of the book from start to finish.
Well, so the way I designed it was to be a simple 2-hour read. And I know that nobody has money for trainings these days. And so what I did is I put a discussion guide, a training guide in the back of the book that tracks the book. So if I have a lot of companies or even just churches or groups that will buy the book together as a book club, read it together, and then just do the questions in the back. Now you can apply for professional education credit in whatever your jurisdiction is. But it's also a terrific training tool, because rather than having somebody talk at you, you and I get to discuss something and I say, oh, that was so stupid. And you say, well, it really resonated with me. Really? I don't understand why. Now we have a conversation. Now we both learned something, and then we bonded. So it's a terrific, easy, free, cheap thing, which is why, the publishers want me to charge for a workbook. And I said, I'm not doing it. I mean, my goal in getting this is high tide raises all ships. And I want everybody, we should be teaching this kind of stuff in school, and we don't. And so it's simple and it's easy, and it just makes your life easier to wipe up the spaghetti sauce when it's wet. So that's how I designed the book. 20 chapters, 20 tools, each with sentence stems and stories and anecdotes. And what I tell people is take my stories, take them. Every single one in that book I've used over 100 times, and I know they work for the point that's done. So if you're dealing with somebody, rather than saying, well, that's not the right way to do it, let me explain it to you. Lori, can I share a story with you? You're not going to say no, then I share a story. And that lets you on your own, like the lipstick story or the bomb detector, or I've got so many in the book, to where you can say, oh, okay. Now the learning just got internalized.
Mm.
And it wasn't by me taking power over you by splaining it to you. You know, nobody likes that.
Nobody wants to be explained anything. Absolutely. I love the idea of making it kind of be more strategic, be more intentional in those conversations and taking the time to pause and offer the person whom you're speaking with the opportunity to participate and actively participate and contribute to whatever solution you end up coming up with. And even if, you're coming into that conversation thinking, Hesha, the way you're doing that is just wrong, and you decide to apply Hesha's advice and start with, Hesha, can I just tell you a story? Maybe the way you think it's supposed to end, I would not say maybe, more often than not, the way that you've already decided it should end and you're strategically kind of setting up to end that way will actually take you in an entirely different direction.
Right.
But by taking that approach, then you're ensuring that both parties, so both people in that conversation, have had to contribute to the conversation. And what we contribute to creating, we will uphold. We will commit to actually delivering on, right? At the end
There
of the
you
day.
go.
Absolutely.
There you
Absolutely.
go. And what I would tell people, because I think we're probably near the end, is that my webpage, holdingthecalm.com, has all kinds of stuff on it. Podcasts, ideas, new things. I put it on there free just so people can go and get it, and they can sign up for my newsletter. It's not really a newsletter. Once a month when I think of cool things, I just send it out to people.
Yes.
I tell people to connect with me on LinkedIn because I post almost every day some little tidbit. I have little 1-minute videos. Everything I do is short and tight and sweet because we're all busy. And that's why you're so smart with these podcasts being 30 minutes, because we're all busy. It's all we can really commit to time wise. So I'm hoping that this is help to people. It's been an Amazon bestseller, which has been very exciting. And if you do get it on Amazon, please leave a nice review because that helps the whole search engine optimization nonsense.
Right. Oh, I love that you called it nonsense, because I 100% agree. We were talking really briefly before the show. Algorithms and SEO is the bane of my existence sometimes, because like you, I want to give the information out for free. It's not necessarily about kind of, getting the most followers or the most likes. That's not what it's about. It's about getting these tools into the hands of people, the most people possible, so they can start to use them, so we can give them their spoons. It's about giving everyone a spoon so you can eat the soup and better navigate, just tension in general. And in my case, your workplace culture in general, where, let's be honest, folks, tension is a permanent resident and is not likely going to go anywhere. Really quickly, in the moment, if you want, and I'm okay with us going maybe a minute or a few minutes over, when tension arises, we all know, we've all walked into a meeting, we've all been in a conversation when you absolutely know there is tension there. In addition to the tips you've already provided us, what would the number one tip be that you would provide clients?
That you say to yourself, I'm holding the calm. And the reason for that is because never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And the reason for that is our amygdala, rises up and it makes you feel powerless. So if you walk into a room, there's tension, your amygdala is triggered going, oh, what am I walking into? What's happening here? What am I doing? So I use it. That's why I call the book that. I use it as a mantra for myself. I'll say, I'm holding the calm. I'm holding the calm. I'm holding the calm. That takes 2 seconds. And what it says to my nervous system is, I've got options. I've got choices. I've got power. I can do this. But it's more potent than I can do this, because it actually says, I'm holding the calm. So either I'm holding it for myself, I'm holding it for others. And what will happen is other people aren't going to say, oh my God, Laura, you're so good at holding the calm. What they're going to say is, you just get along with everyone, don't you? Or you just seem to make things better. Or, you're a very good leader. You're a good team player. I mean, that's what people will say when you use these holding the calm tips. And so I use that as a mantra for myself, which is why I call the book that.
I love it. And what I also heard from what you just said, you talked about power, and power or lack thereof, or perception of lack thereof, is often the root of a lot of tension and
Indeed.
conflict. So
Indeed.
what I'm also hearing is in that calm is true power.
Indeed. Beautifully said.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hesha. If listeners want to continue connecting, you talked about your website as well as LinkedIn. Is there any additional socials that you want them to connect with you on?
We also have a Facebook page, Holding the Calm on Facebook, or holdingthecalm.com, and LinkedIn. So far, that's all I really have.
I think it's a lot.
But it's, I have a niece that is very big on Instagram, and so she's told me that she wants to start doing that, and I said, all right, God bless, thank you.
Well, I've discovered you can actually connect your Instagram to your Facebook page. So automatically when you're putting on Facebook, it's showing up on Insta. So you don't actually have to do it twice because they're both owned by Meta. This is like things
Rock on.
over time as I'm starting to figure out this whole social media thing, and I'm making myself sound old. Listeners, I'm aware by having that entire comment just take place. So thank you, listeners, for listening in. That was some amazing insight from Hesha. Please go out there, get her book. It sounds like it is a powerful tool. Quick read, 2 hours, whatever next flight you're on, pick it up and read it on. You could probably read it throughout that one flight and leave with a number of tools to better navigate. In that book is your spoon for navigating tension and conflict. So thank you for listening. And at the end of the day, as I always say, please reflect on what you've just heard. What one nugget of wisdom could you possibly take away, decide an action you want to do to start implementing it right away, and go do that? Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guest, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.